Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into some really, really fascinating stuff that you brought to us.
Yeah,
You've got these excerpts from these self-help books, right? Packed with advice and stories that are just like super inspirational. And then like right alongside that, you've got this like coming of age novel. It's almost like we're getting wisdom from like two totally different perspectives, you know? Like a mentor who's like been there, done that, and a friend who's like sharing their like super personal journey.
I think what's really interesting right off the bat is how these different sources, like they seem so different, but they actually kind of converge on these really like fundamental human experiences. Like we're seeing a lot about what drives us, motivation, and then this sense of like something bigger than ourselves. Maybe we could call that spirituality, in a broad sense. And then, of course, there's a whole thing about like getting through tough times, finding some peace, and how we actually change and grow from all of it. It's a really rich mix that really speaks to what it means to be human.
Yeah, totally. So today we're going to like really dig into these texts, right? We're going to pull out the like most interesting parts, the nuggets of wisdom, and try to give you a concentrated dose of inspiration and maybe some practical tips for dealing with life's ups and downs. Think of it as like a shortcut to feeling more empowered and maybe even seeing things in a new light. So to kick things off, it seems like we should start with like the power of stories, right? Like how these sources use stories to get their points across.
That's a great place to start.
Mm-hmm.
Pure joy, right from the introduction, tells us that it's all about uplifting people. Through these stories of triumph and moments of like spiritual insight, it sets the stage for learning and connecting through these shared human experiences.
And finding serenity is right there with them. The foreword talks about how this book can help us take back control of our well-being. And it calls personal stories the soul of the book. Like literally, they're not messing around when it comes to believing in the power of shared journeys.
Totally. And then we have Sea Glass Heart, which is fiction, right? It's all about Maya and her journey of growing up. It's about heartbreak, healing, and ultimately transforming into a more mature person. And even though it's made up, it still resonates with us emotionally, offering another way to explore these themes on a deeper level.
Exactly. And Finding Serenity has this whole section on sharing real-life experiences that really stood out. It talks about how these stories give us hope and comfort by showing us that there are so many different ways to find peace, not just one right way.
And that connects beautifully with the idea of the power of shared experience that they talk about later in Finding Serenity. It's all about how these stories help us feel less alone when we're going through tough times, especially with mental health. They normalize our struggles because we see that others have gone through similar things.
So it's like a recurring theme, right? Whether it's real stories or fictional journeys, we learn, we get hope, and we don't feel so isolated by connecting with the experiences of others. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about another big theme that's woven through these sources: overcoming adversity and building resilience. Pure Joy hits us with a really powerful story right off the bat.
Oh, absolutely. Sarah's story, Rising from the Ashes, is a perfect example of resilience in action. This woman loses everything in a fire, her home, her parents. Talk about adversity. But the story really emphasizes her determination and how, with the help of her community, her friends and neighbors who really rally around her, she manages to rebuild her life. It's incredibly moving.
Yeah, that image of rising from the ashes is so powerful. And Pure Joy even gives us this takeaway from Sarah's story, that no matter how impossible things may seem, we have the strength inside us that allows us to get back up and thrive. It's pure hope. What Sarah's experience really shows us is what we call post-traumatic growth. It's not just bouncing back. It's about coming out the other side even stronger and with a new sense of purpose. It shows that going through tough times, although painful, can actually push us to evolve in incredible ways.
And Finding Serenity adds to this with its section on finding hope and inspiration. The key here is self-compassion. It's not just about toughing it out, but also about recognizing how hard it is and being kind to ourselves along the way. They also talk about how recognizing even our small wins, our everyday accomplishments, can help us build resilience over time. It's about making steady progress, not demanding perfection right away.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it connects with Maya's story in Sea Glass Heart, right? After the betrayal, she's dealing with some serious emotional baggage. But she finds ways to cope. Her art becomes her outlet, her way of expressing everything she's going through, and then she starts volunteering at the animal shelter, connecting with something outside of her own pain.
Right. And those things, which might seem small at first, are actually really big steps in her healing. They show how finding healthy ways to channel our pain and connecting with something bigger than ourselves can be so important for getting better.
So, whether it's a huge tragedy like Sarah's or a personal heartbreak like Maya's, these sources are telling us that overcoming adversity isn't about being invincible. It's about tapping into our inner strength, being kind to ourselves, and sometimes seeking support and finding healthy ways to deal with our challenges. Now, let's talk about another uplifting theme: pursuing dreams and passions. Mark's story in Pure Joy comes to mind here.
Mark's the artist's journey is like a classic tale of following your passion even when it's tough. He loves painting, but life gets in the way, and his own self-doubt starts to hold him back. The story really highlights his persistence. Like, he goes to workshops, he studies different techniques, even though galleries keep rejecting his work.
And then there's this element of, well, you could call it luck, but maybe it's more like preparation meeting opportunity. An art critic at a cafe sees his paintings of the Carlsbad flower fields and loves them. It's like a reminder that breakthroughs can happen when you least expect them, but you have to be ready for them by putting in the work. The message seems to be, go after your dreams with all you've got, both in terms of effort and passion.
And we see something similar with Maya in Sea Glass Heart. Her art isn't just a hobby, it becomes her lifeline after her heartbreak. It helps her process her emotions and eventually becomes her career. It shows how a passion can be both a source of comfort during tough times and a path to a more fulfilling life.
Yeah, it's like nurturing our passions isn't just about achieving success in the traditional sense, but it's about building an inner strength and sense of purpose that helps us get through difficult times. Now, let's turn our attention to something that pops up in a really heartwarming way in these sources: kindness and connection. Pure Joy has a really sweet story about this.
Emily's story, The Ripple Effect, shows how small acts of kindness can have a huge impact. It's like a chain reaction of good vibes spreading through a community. She helps an older man with his groceries, and that simple act inspires others to be kind too. It's beautiful.
It's amazing how one act of generosity can start this domino effect. And Finding Serenity backs this up in its section on finding strength in community. It talks about how the support we get from others is essential for overcoming hardships and feeling like we belong, which is so important for our well-being.
And Finding Serenity introduces this idea of Ubuntu from Southern Africa. Ubuntu is all about how interconnected we are, how our well-being is tied to the well-being of the community. It shows that acts of kindness and empathy aren't just nice things to do, they actually contribute to our own sense of belonging and support. It's like a beautiful loop of positive energy.
Right, and we see Ubuntu in action in Sea Glass Heart with Maya's kindness toward Gus, this neglected dog she meets at the shelter. That connection becomes a turning point in her healing process.
Absolutely. Taking care of Gus gives her a renewed sense of purpose and helps her look beyond her own pain. It's a real catalyst for her healing and sets her on this path of self-discovery and connection. It shows how reaching out to others, even animals, can be so therapeutic.
So kindness and connection aren't just pleasantries. They're essential for our well-being. They help us get through challenges and build stronger, more supportive communities. Now let's dive into something that's probably on a lot of people's minds: finding inner peace and managing stress. All three of these sources touch upon this in their own way.
Pure Joy takes a more spiritual approach with its message, Finding Inner Peace. It talks about actively seeking tranquility, often through faith and tapping into our inner strength. It's about finding that stillness within, especially when doubts and worries are weighing us down.
And Finding Serenity gets more practical with its idea of defining calm in a hectic world. It makes this important point. Managing stress isn't about getting rid of it completely. It's about understanding it and how it affects us personally. It's about becoming aware of our own stress responses, whether they're physical, emotional, behavioral, or mental.
That section in Finding Serenity about recognizing the symptoms of stress is so important. It goes into detail about all the ways stress can show up: muscle tension, digestive problems, sleep issues, worry, difficulty concentrating. It even talks about the long-term health consequences of unmanaged stress, like how it affects our heart, our immune system, and our mental health.
And then the book talks about identifying personal triggers, those specific things that set off our stress responses. Once we know what our triggers are, Finding Serenity says we can start to develop coping strategies, whether that's relaxation techniques, setting boundaries, or seeking support.
And they don't just leave us hanging. Finding Serenity also offers tools and techniques with its section on mindfulness techniques for daily life. It introduces mindfulness, which is all about being present in the moment. They talk about focusing on our breath, tuning into our senses, and doing things like body scan meditation and mindful movement. Mindfulness isn't about clearing your mind, it's about changing your relationship with your thoughts. You observe them without judging them, and that can actually make them less powerful. It's a simple but profound way to handle stress.
They even trace mindfulness back to its roots in Buddhist traditions, talking about things like vipassana, which is about seeing reality as it is, and metta, which is about cultivating kindness and compassion. Understanding these intentions adds a whole new layer to mindfulness and explains how these practices can help us reduce stress, improve focus, and regulate our emotions in our busy modern lives. And I love how they emphasize integrating mindfulness into routine activities like washing the dishes, commuting, even eating as a way to bring mindfulness into our everyday lives. They also mention things like diaphragmatic breathing, which is so simple but effective.
What's cool is that even Sea Glass Heart, which isn't a self-help book, explores the idea of inner peace. After Maya's heartbreak, she finds comfort and calm in pottery, this really tactile and focused activity. Volunteering at the animal shelter gives her a sense of peace, too, through connection and helping others. Even the fantastical quest she goes on can be seen as a metaphor for her journey toward inner peace.
Yeah, totally. It shows that finding peace isn't always about making a conscious effort. Sometimes it happens naturally when we do things that are meaningful and connect us to something bigger than ourselves. Now, let's move on to forgiveness, which is another powerful theme that shows up in these sources.
Pure Joy has a whole section on forgiveness, highlighting its importance for emotional healing and finding freedom. They give examples like Sarah and Michael, who both experience betrayal and abuse, but eventually find healing through forgiveness. The key takeaway is that holding on to anger and resentment only keeps us trapped in the pain of the past.
And we see this play out in Sea Glass Heart with Maya's journey. It takes time, but in the epilogue, she finally forgives Liam.
That moment in the epilogue is so significant. It represents her finally letting go and moving on without that baggage of resentment. Forgiveness isn't about saying what happened was okay. It's about freeing ourselves from the pain it caused.
It's about choosing to release that burden and making space for new beginnings. Now, let's touch on gratitude and mindfulness, which often go hand in hand in boosting our well-being. Pure Joy has some wisdom to share on this too, right?
Yep, they have this message called Gratitude and Mindfulness. It emphasizes being thankful for what we have and living in the present moment, instead of dwelling on the past or worrying about the future. It's about shifting our focus from what we're missing to appreciating what we already have.
And that ties back to what we discussed earlier from Finding Serenity, about being present in the moment. Cultivating gratitude and mindfulness seems like a recipe for a more fulfilling and peaceful life.
They're totally intertwined. When we practice mindfulness, we become more aware of the good things in our lives, and that naturally leads to feeling grateful. And when we're grateful, it brings us into the present moment. It's a beautiful cycle that benefits us in so many ways.
Okay, let's shift gears again and talk about self-belief and motivation, that driving force that pushes us forward. Pure Joy includes some really inspiring quotes on this.
Oh yeah, some great ones. Steve Jobs reminds us to love what you do. Theodore Roosevelt tells us to believe you can, and you're halfway there. Eleanor Roosevelt highlights the power of dreams, saying, "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." And Franklin D. Roosevelt reminds us that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. It's all about passion, confidence, and believing in what's possible.
And Pure Joy also has these direct messages like believe in yourself, which reminds us of our potential and even suggests that we have this inherent support for achieving our goals.
Yeah.
And that you got this message is like a pure shot of encouragement to face our fears, take risks, and believe in ourselves.
It's that belief in ourselves, that unwavering confidence, that often makes the difference between giving up and pushing through to achieve our dreams.
Now, we've touched on Sea Glass Heart throughout this discussion, but let's take a closer look at Maya's journey specifically, her healing and transformation.
We see her first love, all innocent and exciting, like a fairy tale. Then comes the betrayal, which shatters her world and leaves her feeling lost, hurt, and doubting herself.
And her support systems are crucial to her healing. Her family gives her unconditional love and a safe space. And seeking help from Mrs. Thompson, the school counselor, is a big step forward.
Mrs. Thompson teaches her coping skills like breathing exercises and journaling. She provides a safe space for Maya to explore her feelings and make sense of what happened. And then Maya starts seeking out new passions and connections. Pottery becomes her therapy, and volunteering at the animal shelter leads her to Gus.
And then the story takes this interesting turn with the magical elements Corelia and the quest for the pearl. How do you see these elements fitting into Maya's journey?
I think they're metaphors for her inner growth and the challenges she has to face within herself. Her journey to the Whispering Caves, facing the swollen stream, and solving the riddles represent her confronting her fears and discovering her strength and resilience.
And the sea glass heart itself is such a powerful symbol.
Totally. Sea glass is beautiful because it's formed from broken pieces, smooth and transformed by the ocean. It's like a perfect symbol for Maya's journey. It reminds us that even after heartbreak, we can heal and become even stronger and more beautiful.
And the epilogue shows us Maya in the future, a successful artist who's found peace and purpose.
That glimpse into her future is so important. It emphasizes that healing takes time and that true, lasting healing is possible. It gives us hope and a satisfying ending to her story.
It really brings together all the themes we've been talking about: resilience, finding our passions, the importance of connection, and the potential for transformation.
Exactly. And leaves you feeling hopeful, empowered, and optimistic about the possibility of positive change.
As we wrap up this deep dive, it's amazing how these different sources, the self-help advice, the real-life stories, and the fictional narrative all come together to highlight these interconnected themes. We've talked about the power of sharing our stories, resilience, the importance of kindness and connection, finding peace through mindfulness, forgiveness, and self-belief.
And they all point to this incredible human capacity for healing, growth, and transformation. It's a message of hope, empowerment, and the potential for change that's relevant to everyone.
So, to you, our listener, we encourage you to think about what resonates most with you. Maybe it's the idea of a small act of kindness or practicing mindfulness. Even incorporating one small thing into your life can make a difference. Remember, Maya and the sea glass heart, beauty, and strength can come from brokenness. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.